I want to thank Thomas and the Global Justice Program for putting on this event every year. Thomas has been a tremendous partner with Global Financial Integrity in promoting the Sen Prize each year for the last 8 years. And it's great. We're able to bring scholars from around the world to talk about illicit financial flows and their impact on their countries and their regions. We've got 3 excellent papers today. Before we get to those authors and their presentations, for those of you who do not know Global Financial Integrity, we are a Washington-based nonprofit think tank. We were launched in 2006, and we do research and provide policy remedies for issues related to illicit flows, illicit trade, money laundering, and political corruption. And about 8 years ago, we launched this award prize named after Amartya Sen, the Indian Nobel economist who spent his career or is spending his career focused on issues related to social justice, health, and welfare of people around the world. And so we thought it was a great partnership. He allowed us to use his name, and we have done this ever since. So that's a little bit of background on the history of the prize and the organization. Let's get right to the winners. The first place winner this year is Chia-Yun Po, who was awarded first prize for her paper titled Myanmar's Jade, the intersection of illicit financial flows and armed conflicts. She's currently a third-year LLM student at the National Taiwan University College of Law, specializing in human rights, corporate governance, banking law, and international arbitration. Excuse me. She focuses on the fields of armed conflict, sustainable development, and corporate accountability in transnational human rights violations. Prior to this particular prize, the Amartya Sen Prize, she's won several other prestigious essay prizes in Taiwan, including one that analyzed genocide against the Rohingya refugees in Myanmar, and an essay examining the Taiwan Supreme Administrative Court's decision concerning the rights of transgender public officials in Taiwan. After she's awarded her LLM degree, she hopes to pursue a law degree in the United States and enter the field of business and human rights. So let's turn it to Chia-Yun Po for her remarks about her paper.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. And I'm very honored to be here. And I'm actually very flattered to receive the first place of the 8th Amartya Sen Essay Prize. The topic of my essay is Myanmar's Jade, the intersection of illicit financial flow and armed conflict. As we all know that Myanmar is having a democratic and humanitarian crisis now. The Myanmar's military just overthrown the civilian government since this February. And one of the major reasons why the military can operate above the law is its control over valuable natural resources such as jade, timbers, and gas. Jade is one of the most lucrative natural resources that is controlled by the military. And according to a report on Myanmar's jade conducted by Global Witness in 2015, Myanmar's jade production could be worth at least 31 billion US dollar per year, which equals to 50% of Myanmar's GDP. But unfortunately, only 2% of which is taxed by the civilian government. The 98% of the jade production has been a slush fund for Myanmar's military. But Myanmar's military cannot make a great fortune out of jade without a buyer. The major buyer of Myanmar's jade is not the people of Myanmar, but China. China has been the destination of 90% of Myanmar's jade. So my essay contributes to elucidate China's role and in sustaining and aggravating the vicious cycle between jade and armed conflict in Myanmar's jade industry, and how China's current policy can be an antidote to this problem. So now let me share my PowerPoint. Okay, this is the topic of my essay. And the Myanmar's military has controlled Myanmar's major jade mines since 1994 with a ceasefire agreement with the non-state armed force Kachin Independent Army. And the Myanmar's military has turned Myanmar's jade business into a mutually reinforced vicious cycle between jade and armed conflict. On the one hand, to monopolize jade, the military has committed genocidal crimes in Myanmar states, which contain a wealthy deposit of jade, and the scale of massacre, displacement, sexual violence against women and men is to the extent that the UN Human Rights Chair called these military clearance operation a textbook example of ethnic cleansing. And on the other hand, the economic interest in jade business will refinance more military clearance operations against minorities in Myanmar. And it will also buttress the military's financial independence. And the military has made billions of dollars annually out of jade through three major approaches. The first approach is through briberies paid for jade concessions by miners, jade merchants, and mining companies. And the second approach is through the jade revenue paid by its crony company. Crony capitalism has defined Myanmar's jade business for decades. And the military control Myanmar Economic Holding Limited is the most notorious crony company that glues jade and armed conflict. The MEHL has a very versatile business portfolio spanning from the field of mining, telecommunication, textile, tourism, finance, and construction. And the governance structure of MEHL is consistent with the ranking in the military. For example, as you can see in this PowerPoint, the picture on the left hand is Min Aung Hlaing, the commander-in-chief of military of Myanmar, who is also the chairman of MEHL. And the one on the right hand is So Win, the deputy commander-in-chief in Myanmar, who is also the vice chairman of MEHL. So, and as you can see in this figure, MEHL and its 22 subsidiaries have received much more jade concessions than companies without military connections. In 2018, MEHL has held at least 795 jade concessions, and some of its subsidiaries even hold the most valuable jade mines, that contains jadites, which is the highest grade of jade. So on the surface, MEHL currently only hold 150 to 200 acres of jade mining area in Myanmar. But if you also count the jade concessions that were held by companies who have joint venture with the MEHL, then the MEHL's control over jade mine could be as high as 1,000 acres in Myanmar. So this figure really demonstrates how crony capitalism controls Myanmar's jade industry. And the third approach that the militaries can benefit from Myanmar's jade business is through jade smuggling, specifically through the extortion in the checkpoints on the jade smuggling routes to China and the money directly generated by jade smuggling. China is the biggest market for Myanmar's jade, and it is estimated that around 80% of jade output is smuggled to China. The military make a great fortune by being a mafia in both the jade mine site and on the jade smuggling routes to China. The mining regions in Myanmar are heavily militarized, and the smuggling routes to China are dense with the military checkpoint. As you can see in this picture, the Sino-Myanmar borders are dense with the military checkpoints. Each gray dot is a checkpoint established by the military. And all jade mining companies need to pay the soldiers in the militaries in exchange for protection, either in the mine site or in the jade smuggling routes. And it is estimated that the extortion in the checkpoints is at least 20% of the value of the carried jade. Although the exact magnitude of illicit financial flow of jade to Myanmar's military is unknown, but my essay presents another plausible approach to calculate the annual value of smuggled jade from Myanmar to China. Since then, nearly 80% of jade is smuggled to China, China's official import data of jade collected by the UN Commerce and Trade database can only account for approximately 20% of total jade import. Therefore, we can multiply 4 times China's official jade data to calculate the real value of the smuggled jade. And in this figure, the blue dashed line, turns to present the estimated value of smuggled jade each year. And that is 4 times as large as China's official imported number. And as you can see, there is a peak in the year 2014 that which shows that the value of the smuggled jade from Myanmar to China could be as high as $50 billion US. So by this figure, we can see how crucial China's role is in Myanmar's jade industry. And China is the destination of 90% of Myanmar's jade. So in the following part, this essay explores the 3 key elements that drive Chinese demand for Myanmar's jade, which are, firstly, Chinese jade-loving culture. Secondly, the corruption in Chinese bureaucracy. And thirdly, the capital outflow in renminbi. And I will start with the origin of Chinese jade-loving culture. The Chinese have historically coveted for jade much more than people of other cultures since ancient times. The rarity, better translucency, and the brighter green color of Myanmar's jade became a hit in the Chinese jade market since the 19th century. And this hit only declined from the Chinese Civil War, in the period from Chinese Civil War to the eve of Chinese economic reform, and this hit rapidly revived after China reopened its economy. The China's love of jade is deeply rooted in Confucianism. In the canon of Confucianism, Confucius applauded jade for its hardness and transparency, which shares with the quality of the ancient superior man in Confucianism. And as you can see in this paragraph in the Analects Li Ji Ping Li, paragraph 12, Confucius has said, and I quote, "Anciently, superior men found the likeness of all excellent qualities in jade," and so on. So by Confucius' praises on Jade, Jade has been the apple of the eye of Chinese people. And the second element that drives the Chinese demand for Myanmar's Jade is the corruption in Chinese bureaucracy. Myanmar's Jade not only symbolizes in Jade bribery, elegant bribery paid to Chinese public servants. Elegant bribery.
I think you're having some difficulty with your microphone.
Really? Can you hear me?
That sounds perfect. Yeah, maybe it was covered or something, but we can hear you loud and clearly now.
Okay, so I'll just keep going. And let me start with the elegant bribery. Elegant bribery is a unique kind of corruption in China, which means that bribery is not paid by money, but paid by artworks, such as jades and painting. And Myanmar's jades are popular sources of jade briberies to Chinese public officials due to their value and their texture. The two pictures shown in this PowerPoint demonstrate how rampant jade bribery is among Chinese top officials. The picture on the left hand is the former deputy governor of Anhui province. And this picture is found on a Chinese website, marking that the deputy governor of Anhui's crazy love of jade bribery, which is so crazy that even himself became part of a jade decoration. And according to the Chinese Communist Party's report of Central Commission for Discipline and Inspection, the former deputy governor of Anhui, whose name is Nifa Ke, kept collecting jade bribes from mining bosses, real estate bosses, and others with a total value of $1 million, accounting for 80% of the total bribes he received. At the end of the February 2021, Nifa Ke was sentenced to 17 years in prison for his corruption. And another corrupted jade-loving Chinese top official is Xu Caiho on the right hand of the picture. Xu Caiho is a former vice chairman of Chinese Communist Party's military commission, and he decorated his mansion with massive jade carvings. And when his mansion was ransacked by investigators, the investigator found 20 kilograms of Burmese jade, antiques, and stunning 19 million jade TV wall show also in the left downward part of this PowerPoint in his home. Although the amounts of jade briberies in these two examples are astonishing, they are just the tip of an iceberg of jade briberies in China. And the third element is the capital outflow in renminbi. China's capital fly through the black market and the underground bank worth at least $1.2 trillion per year. And jade transactions at the Sino-Myanmar border that are supported by a well-developed underground banking system are avenues for assets in renminbi to flee from China. In other words, the capital outflow in renminbi drive the Chinese demand for Myanmar's jade as well. The euro-denominated jade market in Upper Myanmar is not only a jade bazaar, but also a transit point for the capital outflow in renminbi. In the jade market between Yunnan province, China, and Mandalay, Myanmar, people can exchange millions of, or even tens of millions of renminbi into any currencies they want. And then the underground bank in Myanmar will help the customer to transfer money overseas with charging 1% to 5% handling fee. And this process is so-called the pairing account, or in Chinese we call 账户对敲. And before you use this pairing account, one must have a legitimate cause to bring your money to the Sino-Myanmar border. And in today's China, it is very reasonable for the rich people to buy precious Myanmar's jade so that they can transfer millions of renminbi to the border and into this underground system. So to sum up, Chinese jade loving culture, China's corruption in bureaucracy, and capital flight are three key elements that drives Chinese demand for Myanmar's jade, and thus sustain and aggravate the vicious cycle in Myanmar's jade industry. And therefore, without China's participation and intervention, the current effort that try to reform Myanmar's jade industry will hardly make any significant change. And the US President Joe Biden issued an executive order in April 2021 to sanction the Myanmar's military property. And the US Treasury Department also frees all assets of Myanmar Gem Enterprise and prohibit any transaction with the company. And the government of the UK, EU, and Canada also follow this trend of sanctions. However, none of these efforts see any positive feedback from the military because these efforts overlook the demand side of Myanmar's jade market, which is the role of China. Fortunately, contrary to conventional wisdom, China has the incentive to curb its domestic demand for Myanmar's jade. Because the voracious consumption of jade in China strongly contradicts China's President Xi Jinping's recent targeted policy of anti-corruption campaign and capital control policy. Firstly, nothing ever suppressed the Chinese demand for Myanmar's jade more than the President Xi Jinping's anti-corruption campaign embarked in 2012. The price of Myanmar's jade has fallen by 30% to 35% in 2012 due to the impact of anti-corruption campaign. And because this campaign mainly targeted top officials in China who were indeed the major consumers of Myanmar's jade. And one jade merchant in Myanmar revealed in an interview saying that, and I quote, "The Chinese government's anti-corruption campaign impacted the jade consumption way more than the victory of Aung San Suu Kyi's victory in 2006, unquote." So as you can see in this figure, in 2014, the anti-corruption campaign forbade Chinese officials from giving and receiving gifts during a festival. Those gifts, of course, include precious jade or jadeite that are given as a gift. So after this anti-corruption campaign, you can see the demand for Myanmar's jade drastically plummet. And also the Chinese jade market has witnessed its first negative growth in 2015. Secondly is the capital control policy. As I just mentioned, that there is a loophole in Chinese currency control policy lying in the jade transaction at the Sino-Myanmar border. To shore up China's currency control policy and trade advantage, the central government of China has the incentive to regulate their domestic demand on Myanmar's jade. And based on this analysis, actually China has a very strong incentive to curb the Chinese demand for Myanmar's jade. Now let me turn to my recommendation. My recommendation to break up the vicious cycle between jade and armed conflict in Myanmar are both to international society and to the government of Myanmar. And I think it is very important that the international society stand in solidarity not to recognize the current junta, and also have to sanction all jade products, not only from Myanmar, but also from China, since China is the destination for most of Myanmar's jade. And to the government of China, I recommend that the government of China should keep strengthening its anti-corruption campaign and forbidding its top officials from receiving or giving jade as a gift. And the government of China should investigate corruption in the custom at the Sino-Myanmar border. Also, the government of China should mandate banks to track any transactions of Myanmar's jades that are more than 50,000 US dollar, which is also the cap of foreign currency exchange per person per year in China. And lastly is that, and I recommend the government of China to impose the Know Your Customer process in jewelry stores or emporiums in Yunnan, Guangdong, and Shanghai, where are most of the Myanmar's jade sold in China. And my essay concludes that the solidarity of international community and the intervention of China, of the government of China are two essentials to suppress global demand for Myanmar's jade. And international society should strive to remove the military's control on both the government and on Myanmar's jade mines. And the government of China should keep push on its targeted policy of anti-corruption campaign and capital control. Because these two policies are so far the most effective ways from the demand side to cut off the jade fields to this junta. So this is all of my presentation.
Well, thank you so much. It was a very interesting presentation and certainly a very interesting paper as well. It points to, as we see in a number of other countries, the adverse influence the military can have on a country's economy. We see this in Egypt and Sudan and other places where natural resources are used to continue the corruption of the military in the economy and in the society. So thank you very much for that. It also shows, I think, what political will can do on the Chinese side. By addressing corruption, you can really have an impact. And that's a key to a lot of anti-corruption problems or anti-corruption solutions, I should say. If the government has and can demonstrate political will, it can have a real positive impact. I think we'll hold any questions to perhaps the end of the presentations, make sure we have enough time to get everybody involved. Let's now turn to Christopher Ngosa, who will share the second prize award. This year we had two co-winners of the second prize. The judges couldn't decide which of the two papers were better than the other, and so we decided to split the prize this year. So congratulations to Christopher Ngosa for the second prize. His paper is titled "The Gendered Impacts of Illicit Financial Flows in Developing Countries." He is a Zambian development researcher who graduated from the University of Zambia in 2012 with a bachelor's degree in development studies. And since then, he has worked as a research assistant in institutions such as the Anti-Corruption Commission of Zambia, the Zambian Ministry of Health, and the Zambian Food Nutritional Commission. He is currently completing his Master's of Arts degree in Development Studies at the University of Zambia, where his dissertation topic is the effects of COVID-19 on the food system among small-scale farmers. After completing his master's, he would like to pursue a PhD in international development and hopes to work with institutions that deal with research and advocacy in his areas of interest, which include illicit financial flows, poverty, and global justice.
This presentation is entitled "The Gendered Impacts of Illicit Financial Flows in Developing Countries." According to the order of this presentation, we have the background, and introduction, what is meant by illicit financial flows. We also look at the extent of illicit financial flows and gender inequality, how illicit financial flows affect women, and what needs to be done. In terms of the background, what do we mean by the gendered effects or impacts of illicit financial flows? This simply means the analysis of the concept of illicit financial flow through a gendered lens. Put in other words, this means adding a gender dimension to the issue of illicit financial flows. Illicit financial flows are a major global challenge. And this has resulted in the curbing of illicit financial flows to be put on top agenda according to the Sustainable Development Goals. To be specific, Goal 16 targets 16.4. So, how do we define illicit financial flows? Illicit financial flows are defined as the illegal movement of money or capital from one country to another. The movement is considered illicit when the funds are illegally and transferred or utilized. That is according to the Global Financial Integrity. So, according to a high-level panel on illicit financial flows from Africa, it is estimated that Africa is losing more than 50 billion United States dollars annually. Then let's look at the extent of illicit financial flows in developing countries. So an example is, let's focus on Africa. Global Financial Integrity argues that Africa loses about 70 billion United States dollars annually. Let's try to take a comparative analysis here. This is the picture which is displayed there, where we have outflows via illicit financial flows through a form of trade pricing is represented by 38.4 billion United States dollars. Then when you look at inflows via foreign direct investment in Africa is 32.7 billion United States dollars. Then when you look at aid, it's only 29.5 billion United States dollars. These are times of sustainable development goals, and one of the key issues in the sustainable development goals is domestic resource mobilization. So looking at the discrepancy between these figures, this automatically tells us the negative effect on the budget of developing countries. So let's look at illicit financial flows and gender equality. Let's look at the link. So there isn't much when it comes to the issue of illicit financial flows and gender equality. What literature usually reviews is the quantification of illicit financial flows, what that means on development, but literature lacks the gender lens of these much needed resources lost by illicit financial flows. Taxation definitely comes into play to address economic inequality and gender inequality. Transparency International notes that the loss of the much needed resources via illicit financial flows to provide high quality public services will tend to just sustain poverty and gender inequalities. Still on how illicit financial flows affect women and gender equality. So there are two ways in which illicit financial flows affect women. One, the capability to close the financing gap for gender equality and women's rights is compromised. How do you promote gender initiative when resources are not there? Then secondly, illicit financial flows have negative effects on the vertical aspect of equity. This simply means those who have the ability to pay more taxes should pay more. And the horizontal aspect of equity. The tax rate increases as income increases. So what happens is that there is this unfairness. Instead of those who have more money to pay more taxes, I can give an example of the mining sectors in developing countries. They don't pay more taxes. Simply, developing countries, governments believe that they have to keep such investors. And by all means, their taxation keeps on getting low and low and low. What does that mean? It means that developing countries' governments, in terms of revenue generation, is compromised. So it is argued that the link between gender and illicit financial flows can be investigated from three perspectives. The first perspective is how illicit financial flows affect women. The second one is the roles women can play in illicit financial flows. The third one is how women can help curb illicit financial flows. For this analysis or presentation, we will look at how illicit financial flows specifically affect women. So from this, we categorize this in two forms. The first form, we will look at the outputs and outcomes of illicit financial flows on gender, which are categorized under effects. Then from there, we look at the impacts of illicit financial flows, the long-term effects. So the first effect, now we are looking at the effects, and just to remind you, we are looking at the outcome and outputs of illicit financial flows when it comes to gender inequality. The first effect is that there will be lack of funding for public goods and services. Since we already highlighted the fact that developing countries' government lack resources to fund key public services, the flow of illicit financial flows deprives such governments of revenues needed to fund basic public services, such as education, sexual and reproductive health, maternal care, and social protection. So this automatically results into developing countries' government to prioritize certain sectors, such as the security sectors, over the provision of social services, and this creates a further gap in services offered. So what literature has shown so far is that failure by government to fund public services results in highly gendered effects. Health and education provision, one example of sectors negatively affected. Studies have shown that an increase in illicit financial flows result in a decrease in the provision of health services. So we are looking at the relationship or the link between healthcare and illicit financial flows. So we can see that when there's an increase in illicit financial flows, automatically the provision of health services is affected. And again, when we look at the increase in illicit financial flows, the provision of gender equitable education is affected. Automatically, what this will result is in a phenomenon known as the feminization of poverty, where women are the majority of the poor in an economy, in a country. And this is the actual situation. Majority of women live below the poverty data line. To worsen the situation under the feminization of poverty, when women get employed or find something to do, these job prospects are characterized by poor working conditions, which further means that women become poor. Sometimes feminization of poverty in some cases results in high violation of women's rights through human trafficking. So a case is given of the Ebola epidemic of 2014-2015. Of the 11,000 victims, 75% were women. So it would be interesting to know why these 75% were women. Just through their roles in society, mostly in the developing world society, women are caregivers. Then looking at the amount of illicit financial flows in 3 countries in Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone, it amounted to 1.37 billion United States dollars annually. That was before the Ebola times. Then when it came to budget spending on provision of public health, governments in these countries collectively only spent 140 million United States dollars annually, collectively. So what does this entail when such an economy is hit by an epidemic such as Ebola, or even now COVID? What does this entail to the nature and quality of health services? Meaning the health services are pathetic and they'll be inaccessible to the majority of people. Then the other effect of illicit financial flows is lack of funding for gender equality. So in trying to promote gender equality and bring about economic equality, gender equality projects won't be fully funded because the resources are not there. And the resources are not there, they are lost by illicit financial flows. Then the other effect of illicit financial flows is on women, unemployment, and underinvestment. Illicit financial flows tend to increase the rate of unemployment among women in developing countries. Research has shown that there is a correlation between an increase in illicit financial flows and increase in women unemployment. There we just have a picture of women traders at Soweto Market in Lusaka, Zambia. Then resources are lost through illicit financial flows, affecting economic development. When economic development is affected, it means investment is affected, growth is affected, jobs are affected, and the most people to be affected by jobs, poor jobs, are women. In developing countries with high levels of illicit financial flows, taxation becomes a burden to women. We see the other effect of illicit financial flows on gender. It results in what is known as regressive fiscal policies. So just to paint the picture here clearer, what do we mean by regressive fiscal policies and the gendered impacts? So, like I earlier stated, I stated that resources lost via illicit financial flows will mean that government will provide poor quality services, or government will be forced to charge high consumption taxes. And who uses most of the consumable products is women. So meaning women are negatively affected. Then in terms of striving to attract investors, what governments in mostly developing countries do, they tend to prioritize multinational companies over local companies. What this does is that local companies tend to pay more taxes when compared to multinational companies. And most of the local companies are owned by women. So there is an example given of SAB Miller case in Ghana, where Martha, a local street vendor, pays more than the SAB Miller factory. Then when it comes to businesses which are owned by women, they tend to pay more consumption taxes compared to those owned by men. Then now, this automatically graduates into the gendered impacts of illicit financial flows. So what are the gender impacts of illicit financial flows? Gender impacts of illicit financial flows on women. Illicit financial flows result into development losses, which spill over to welfare losses for women because of fewer resources to commit to gender equality initiative. The assumption is that the revenue, which is lost by, or the resources lost by illicit financial flows, would have been revenue used to commit to gender equality initiative. It would have been spent on healthcare provision, on education provision, and this would positively benefit women. Then the other impact is impact of illicit financial flows is on peace and security. Illicit financial flows tend to have an effect on conflict and insecurity. What characterizes developing countries in terms of political patronage politics? This simply means countries which have low levels of institutionalization of authority, large amounts of money will be allocated to patronage. So in terms of resource distribution, it won't be based on distributing resources fairly, no. It will be about your connection. And if you don't have connections, meaning you'll be provided with poor public services, and what are the results of this? The citizenry, those who are provided with poor public services, will get agitated. And this is a threat to the national peace and security of the country. When people or the citizens get agitated, the peace and security of a country, like I said, is affected. And the worst affected by insecurity are women, who are mostly refugees, and these are displaced. Women also face changes in their economic roles and are more likely to face gender-based and sexual violence. So what needs to be done after looking at the impacts and the effects of illicit financial flows? Since we said from the start of this presentation, we mentioned the key point that the issue of illicit financial flows is a global challenge. A global challenge always requires global cooperation. So what are some of, how can we cooperate at a global level? These global efforts range from creating initiative to curbing money laundering to improving the sharing of tax information across countries. Then in terms of policy formulation, there is need for women and gender-sensitive policies, both in the coverage and enforcement of anti-illicit financial flows laws and regulations. Definitely, we need advocacy and awareness of gender consciousness in the formation of fiscal policies. There is need for women to get involved in curbing illicit financial flows. But again, here, the question is, how do women get involved? There's little research which has been done on this aspect. Lastly, in curbing illicit financial flows, there's need for more research on the gender effects of illicit financial flows and how women can curb illicit financial flows. Ladies and gentlemen, I've come to the end of our presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Christopher. Very interesting presentation. I think the feminization of poverty is a area where a lot more work can be done. It's a very important aspect of this, and how women, there's increased violence against women, financial insecurity, lack of health care and education for women. And I think you raise a very interesting question at the end, which is how can women affect illicit financial flows? And that may very well be one of the most important questions going forward. How can essentially half the population of many countries coalesce together to address this, to try to get their government to create the political will to address this? So thank you very much for your presentation and congratulations again. Let's go to our third presenter. Oluebube Offor has also shared the second place prize this year for his paper titled Tales of Terrorism Financing in Nigeria, a panoramic account of its root causes, consequential impacts, and possible reforms. He was educated at the University of Nigeria, where he obtained a Bachelor of Science degree in Public Administration and Local Government last year. And his previous essays that he's been awarded the prestigious organizations, including Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria, the Nigeria Film Corporation, and the Standard Organization of Nigeria, among others. In 2018, his essay on impact of leadership and governance on poverty alleviation in Africa won the Academic Stand Against Poverty West Africa undergraduate essay. His research interests include good governance, poverty alleviation, illicit financial flows, and political corruption. Oluebube, you have the floor.
All right, thank you very much for that, Tom. Hope you can hear me. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, before I begin, I would like to talk about illicit financial flows in the world. When we hear about illicit financial flows, we are talking about the illicit movement of funds or money or capital from one border to another. And this form of IFFS have become a bone of contention among scholars, African, international scholars. So, but we know that under illicit financial flows, we have different elements or the critical components of illicit financial flows, which include terrorism financing, tax evasion, political corruption, and anti-money laundering, and money laundering, and also have human and drug trafficking. Now, my essays will be focusing on the tales of terrorism financing in Nigeria, a panoramic account of its causes, consequential impasse, and possible reforms. Now, in this essay, we're going to focus on different vital key points, including the modus operandi of terrorism financing in Nigeria, using Boko Haram as a case study. We are going to talk about the techniques of fund movements, the magnitude estimate, and also the lesser damages of terrorism financing. And then we're also going to talk about the key enablers of terrorism financing, the effort made by government to stem the menace of terrorism financing, and also, lastly, the policy recommendations hitting the bullseye and the conclusion. Now, for the sake of introduction, terrorism financing entails providing financial support from legitimate sources, such as businesses, donations and profit from different organizations and also international terrorist organizations. And they're also from criminal sources, such as human and drug peddling, illicit taxation, kidnapping, extortion, among other things. Now, what led to terrorism financing in Nigeria? As far back as 2002, a man known as Prophet Yusuf Muhammad started a journey or a kind of program or movement, and he named the movement Boko Haram, which means Western education is sin. Now, some years some years later, after the establishment of the movement Boko Haram, Professor Yusuf Mohammed was later captured and killed by the Nigerian security forces. Now, the extrajudicial killing of this man, Professor Yusuf Mohammed, heralded a new dawn of sectarian violence and bloody uprisings in Nigeria. Now, Boko Haram, being the seed of such evil, devised malicious means to fund its operations and expand its capital outflow. Between 2006 and 2011, Boko Haram secured approximately $70 million in revenue through massive extortion from business people in the northeastern part of Nigeria. Also illicit taxation, fervent abductions, which have been happening currently in Nigeria. We also have rampage armed robberies, foreign donations, and political patronage, among other factors, all in a bid to create an independent Islamic state. I want us to also understand that this Boko Haram terrorist group has a common goal, and that is to stop Western education in Nigeria. But due to the fact that the Nigerian government does not subscribe to such belief, they have latched onto various terrorism financing, various methods of terrorism financing, including massive extortion, illicit taxation, abductions, to finance their operation and incubate, or rather perpetrate a terminal crisis in Nigeria. Now, the nature of this act, which many describes as terrorism financing, constitute a major segment of illicit financial flows. And this terrorism financing has become a can of worms that inhibits Nigeria's socio-economic progress. What are the modus operandi of terrorism financing? How do they make their money? We have, in my essay, I focus mostly on the illegal means of fund, which include kidnapping. Depending on one's profile, Boko Haram usually demands a ransom ranging from 10,000 to $1 million, depending on one's profile. We also have arms smuggling. Due to Nigeria's porous border, Boko Haram takes such advantage to smuggle or rather to illegally import weapons, including small and light weapons, into the country. We also have human trafficking. Yeah, abducted male children are often sold between 700,000 naira and 1 million naira, while the female counterparts are being sold between 500,000 and 700,000 naira. That should be between 1,000 to 1,500 US. We also have illicit taxation. A lot of communities in the northeastern part of Nigeria are being taxed illegally by this terrorist organization, and whoever fails to pay such taxation will either be slaughtered or being abducted by this terrorist organization. Now, the United Nations Environment Program estimates that about 5 million persons live under Boko Haram control, and 3/4 of these households are compelled to pay tax. Some of these households, including farmers, poor business people, are compelled to pay a huge amount of 1,500 US. We also have armed robbery. Banks in the northeastern states, including Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa states, have lost up to $6 million US in rampage armed robberies, which we are all linked to the sex. We also have allegiance. Boko Haram, just like other terrorist organizations, liases, or rather, combined with other terrorist organizations outside Africa or outside Nigeria in order to elicit funds from them. In 2015, reports shows that Boko Haram received over $14 million US from the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria to fund its operations across northeastern Nigeria and Lake Chad. Also, we have political patronage. We know in Nigeria, a lot of politicians or people I consider as unscrupulous political elements tend to sponsor Boko Haram fighters in order to advance their personal or rather selfish interests. You have also drug trafficking, among other things. Now, what are the techniques of fund movement? How do they transfer their money? How do they move their money? I also talk about how to track which means physical movement of cash. Boko Haram members usually move from one region to another in Nigeria. And particularly, they use women in advancing such activity, because in Nigeria, particularly Islam, or somewhere else in the world, men Islams are not allowed to have any physical contact with female Muslims. So they use the female Muslims to move funds from one state to another. We also have bank transfers. Through the aid of some bank officials in Nigeria, Boko Haram can transfer money from one bank to another. And even through the help of some prestigious non-governmental organizations, both in Nigeria and outside Nigeria. We also have online digital platforms which have become problematic in Nigeria and elsewhere in the world today. Through cryptocurrency, IFCAs and Bitcoins, Boko Haram can convert their cash into something else known as Bitcoin, and then they might convert it back to the national currency whenever they want to use it. Then we also have arms smuggling. There are about 1,499 irregular, officially identified entry routes which permits terrorists to smuggle small arms and light weapons into the country. I also talk about the magnitude and estimates of terrorism financing in Nigeria. Africa is a kind of occupies a lion's share when it talks about financial losses for terrorism financing. For instance, in 2016, the United Nations Development Programme estimates African economic cost of terrorism at $15.5 billion. Now, this means that the continent's shares of the global financial loss rose from 4.2% in 2007 to 20.3% in 2016. Now, among the 4 African nations that have been crowned the epicenter of violent extremism, Nigeria accounts for more than 89% of the $109 billion that have been lost by 18 African countries. And this 89%, which translates to 97 billion, is 22 times higher than the cost of terrorism financing in some African countries like Burkina Faso and Libya. No doubt, terrorism financing has caused Nigerian foreign direct investment flows to drop at $6.1 billion. Now, what are the lesser damages and the adverse impact of this terrorism financing? Rather, we have the issue of substantive loss of revenue. Government has lost a lot of resources, financial resources, in a bid to fight Boko Haram, and a lot of businesses are closing down. Our potential foreign investors are moving away from the country as a result of insecurity, and this tends to generate or result to loss of tax revenue. We also have exploitation and impoverishment of individuals and corporate organizations. Just like I said earlier, banks in the northeastern part of Nigeria has lost up to $6 million. We also have increased national debt. Nigeria debt currently is more than what we can imagine. For instance, in 2013-14, during the Jonathan administration, the government borrowed up to $1 billion in order to fight Boko Haram. And also during the during this current presidential system led by Muhammad Buhari, the government took about $2.1 billion to fight Boko Haram and repair the aftermath of terrorism financing in Nigeria. We also have Impasse on intra-African trade policy. Now, African trade policy focuses on allowing African country to trade in another African country freely without any form of restriction. But due to the massive importation of illegal weapons by these terrorist organizations known as Boko Haram, the current government on various occasions have shut down the border against in order to prevent the importation of weapons, illegal weapons, and this in the long run tend to negate the policy of the intra-African trade policy. Then we also have violation of human rights. Especially when we talk about violation of human rights, we're referring to young schoolgirls who have been abducted by these terrorist organizations. Most times they are subjected to sex, and other things, among other harsh treatment. We also have psychological disorder and mistiming death, and among other adverse impacts of terrorism financing. What are the key enablers? I say that Nigerian currently has up to 1,499 illegally or officially illegal entry rules, which is aggressive importation of weapons. We also have issue of high unemployment and poverty rates. Nigeria has up to 21.7 million Nigerian youths who are unemployed. And Boko Haram leveraged this opportunity to recruit a lot of youth into their organization. Take, for instance, in the northeastern parts of Nigeria, Boko Haram offers a lot of unemployed youth as high as $5,000 to join their organization, especially the uneducated ones. This tend to increase the menace or the activity of terrorism financing in Nigeria. We have the issue of bad leadership and poor intelligence and information sharing. We also have poor technology and absence of counterterrorism operations. And then we also have impunity, which is part of the key enablers of terrorism financing. A lot of Boko Haram members are being given presidential pardon, and this motivates a lot of youth to join the organization with the mindset that, of course, they will receive their own presidential pardon at the end of the day. We also have poor military capacity and stark illiteracy. Now we have some diagram as pertaining to these key enablers of terrorism financing in Nigeria. I want to talk about arms smuggling in West Africa, Nigeria in focus. Now, looking at the diagram, we see that West Africa particularly, imports up to 500 million weapons. And out of these 500 million weapons, Nigeria occupies about 70% of these 500 million weapons, estimating by checking that should be up to 350 million weapons in Nigeria. Now, this is a typical Nigerian porous border. We know that Nigerian share border with Niger, Chad, and Cameroon, and some other African countries, including Central African Republic and Sudan. And under the Nigerian border, we have Meduguri, where it is situated, Chibok, which is a bit closer to Lake Chad Basin. Now, this border, as you see it here, it's quite porous. There is no solid security or robust security, discourage military personnel. Now, this form of weaknesses permits terrorist organization or terrorist groups to terrorist organization members to import weapons of mass destruction. And this is Nigeria's unemployment rate. You see how it is increasing from 2014, fourth quarter of 2014 to the second quarter of 2020. As of 2014, unemployment rate was 6.4%. Now, I think the last update should be second quarter in 2020, which is 27.1%, amounting to 21.7 million Nigerian youths who are unemployed.
Oluebube, sorry for the interruption. I just want to let you know you have about a minute or two remaining. We're just running a little short on time, and the next panel discussion is going to have to begin right at 11 o'clock. So just to give you a heads up, you have about a minute left.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, now we're going to talk about the effort made so far. Sorry. Now, at the national level, the Nigerian government has established a body known as the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, NFIU, to investigate suspected proceeds of crimes and potential terrorism financing in Nigeria. Also, we have Nigeria is also part of the several counterterrorism initiatives, such as the Global Counterterrorism Forum and Trans-Sahara Counterterrorism Partnership, among other efforts being made to stem the menace of terrorism financing in Nigeria. The way forward, the policy recommendations, I talk about overhauling Nigerian security intelligence. Nigerian security intelligence should be backed up with powerful technologies of the fourth industrial revolution, such as artificial intelligence, visual reality. They should get used to that. And they should also train our officials on forensic technology. There's also need for regional collaboration with other African countries to straighten weak borders, among other things. We also have effective implementation of counterterrorism policies. A lot of policies have been made in Nigeria and in some African countries, but the question remains, have we been able to implement such counterterrorism policies? So we need to be sincere with ourselves. We need to have a kind of pragmatic leadership that will be able to implement counterterrorism policies. And then there is need for intensive ethical reorientation, among other things. In conclusion, looking at the magnitude and estimates of financial outflow in most parts of the world, the financing of terrorism does not only circumvent peace and security, but also threaten the fragile socioeconomic system of many developing nations, including Nigeria. Like I said before, in Nigeria, we have a terrorist organization known as Boko Haram, which often trade on the endemic nature of terrorism financing to acquire bogus wealth and effect fallacious objectives. This essay has documented profound recommendations needed to take the bull by the horn. Now the onus lies on us. Thank you very much. I'll hand over the floor. I'll leave the floor for Mr. Tom. Mr. Tom, thank you.
Thank you very much. This was a great companion piece to the other winners today to talk about the impact illicit financial flows can have on terrorism and the secrecy in the financial system that facilitates both the illicit flows and the terrorism itself. So this is very interesting and a great great companion piece to the others. I want to thank all the winners again for their efforts. I want to thank everyone who has attended. And again, thank you to Thomas and the Global Justice Program for their great partnership over the years. And we look forward to doing this again a year from now. Thanks, everyone.